Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
Hello, you nerds. It's Tejas and Jishnu from the Geek Podcast, which you're about to hear in a bit. But before that, an advertisement.
Hello. The Moja Club makes awesome funky socks that you can buy individually or even better, in a pair. It's crazy, I know. You could get a subscription and sign up for 6 months or a year and get a pair delivered to your house every single month. And they will even throw in one pair for free.
And exclusively for you Geek Fruit nerds, get a full 33% discount. Just go to their website, themojaclub.in, and use the code GeekFruit, that's without spaces, during the checkout.
While there are many actors in Bollywood, there are some who stand out every single time, sometimes just stealing the show from the main actors. I'm talking about actors like Satish Kaushik, Ranveer Shore, Gulshan Grover, all great. And you can listen to them talk about their stories on Bollywood Scene Stealers with Indu Mirani. New episodes out every Monday on iTunes, Stitcher, or the IVM app, which is my personal favorite podcast app.
You're listening to the Geek Fruit Podcast.
Hey, so that was a great episode of the Geek Fruit Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm Tejas and you're Jishnu. What do you think? Did we do a good job?
Full disclosure, guys, this episode is confusing AF. We're talking time and moving through it and other things that time does, like confuse you.
You mean that we just did?
The one that happened that you just heard.
That you just heard, yeah. But in the true spirit of time travel, maybe for those who missed out, we shall quickly go back in time and listen to the episode from the top. How does that sound for a good idea? Stay tuned. We're going to time travel right after this break.
Hi, I'm May, and I'm a huge fan of the indie music scene in our country. A scene that's relatively underground, even though it sometimes speaks its head overground. But there's no shortage of talent, and I get the privilege of interviewing some of the most awesome musicians on my show. I've had the likes of Euphoria, Krish Kale, Hardcore, Randolph Correa. I've had singer-songwriters, folk singers, electronic music producers, playback singers, rappers, fusion artists, instrumentalists, classical musicians, and so on. Whether mainstream or not, these people have chosen to release their original music, and these are the people currently shaping the direction in which our music scene is heading. Join me on my show every Monday and tune in to discover the unique talent coming out of India today.
Everybody, welcome to another episode of the Geek Fruit Podcast. My name is Tejas and I'm with Jishnu. Hi, Jishnu.
Hello.
Cool. So we have a very exciting episode based on an email that we got like a couple of days ago, in fact. I think only yesterday at the time of this recording. It was from Akshat Pandey, and he said, "Hey guys, I have been following the podcast from the first season. Although this is the first time I'm trying to contact you all. Sci-Fly Under the Radar was my favorite episode, and I hereby request you to do more such episodes talking about a bunch of sci-fi films. Maybe something like best realistic sci-fi films, which are more on the science side, like Inception, Interstellar, District 9, etc. Close quote. Or maybe an episode about your favorite time travel movies." And so, Akshat, we have decided to take you up on that offer. Also, because we were trying to think of a cool episode to do this week, and we were just reeling from the entire Star Wars celebration weekend that happened, that we didn't get time to plan anything per se.
Yerp.
So we have decided to do science fiction time travel films.
This is good because this is a really nice topic that's kind of a cop-out, but not really because there's just so much to it. But like he said, the entire weekend was spent in Star Wars land and crying sweet tears in Star Wars land.
Yeah.
So there was really no more room, at least in my head,
emotionally,
to do anything else. And so I didn't. So full disclosure, I have no clue what I'm getting into with this episode. But as I was thinking about it on the way here, there is no limit to the conversation about time when it comes to fiction. Forget science fiction, just fiction in general. Because I think you don't have to necessarily have a movie like, for instance, like A Days of Future Past, which is very clearly about jumping through time actively and deliberately changing things up, or like the Back to the Future series.
Yeah.
You also have things like Jurassic Park, where you are literally contrasting the two things that don't belong in the same
anachronisms.
Ooh, good word use.
Yeah.
I applaud that.
Thank you.
That's a triple word score at least. So you have things like Jurassic Park, you have things like the other end of the spectrum, like I said, you have your Back to the Futures and whatnot, but then you also have even Star Wars itself.
Yeah.
Even
a long
Star
time
Wars
ago
itself.
in
Forget the long time ago. Forget the long time ago. You're contrasting things like Jakku, which is a salvage junkyard, which is about as, roughing it as it gets, and slavery and chains and things like that, and then spaceships come flying down and droids and blasters and whatnot, and nobody bats an eyelid.
Yeah.
So there are several different ways we can take this. I'm very excited because for the first time, Tejas has a laptop in front of him. So
I only have a laptop because I was doing some other work.
Potentially happening. I said before we started, I feel like I'm playing battleships, but I don't have my side of the board. So I'm just going to guess what you're doing, and I'm going to say B7.
I will be if you want me to be.
I see what you did.
All right, but I had a few thoughts before we, get into the whole time travel thing. I thought we'd spend a moment or 8 to discuss Star Wars Celebration, just the highlights. Let's just do that before. I do have I have a plan for the time travel.
Let's
bit of it.
Let's see how it goes. Let me see how much I can derail that.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about Star Wars Celebration.
Yeah.
This is the 40th anniversary of Star Wars, so it's already a big deal. This celebration in particular, I mean, they've been building it up to this one because it's 40 years. Because the very well received Rogue One and Force Awakens are now out, so Star Wars is officially back on and on track. And so I think they wanted to kind of do a big one for this one, also considering the fact that they're not having Celebration next year. And I thought about why they aren't, and there are a couple of good reasons. One is, I don't know if they could top this one. This was a really good year. I mean, like from all the panels that I did catch, particularly the 40 years panel. I mean, that was too much.
That was
It was great.
Starting off strong, you can't get much stronger than that. Because if you think about it, I guess what could they have talked about next year that would be immediately relevant? Other than the Han Solo movie, Rebels would have ended. We'll just talk about that in a second. Rebels would have been done, so there's nothing to talk about there. Clone Wars is done. There's no more animation happening. The only thing they could talk about is stuff that they are starting to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing would be ready to show much of.
And they wouldn't have had any footage yet from the third of this next
At least they
trilogy.
definitely wouldn't be willing to release any
Exactly.
footage. Yeah,
so I mean, so it's a long ways away from all the really juicy stuff, which is why I think they've decided to take a break, come back in 2019, which is when Jishnu and I will be at Star Wars Celebration, wherever it is.
Oh, you booked the ticket? Oh, cool. I'm not free on that Tuesday, but just...
Okay, don't be free. By the way, it happens on the weekend.
So it's fine. So book it on a Wednesday. That gives us one day to sleep, get over jet lag, and then we can go.
All right.
Plan these things.
So here's the highlights of the events that happened at Star Wars Celebration. I'm going to rattle them off, and just know you can give me your hot takes on them. Star Wars The Last Jedi, the teaser trailer dropped. Boom, go.
I saw it twice because he showed it twice, and I will never see it again.
Yeah, same. I mean, I saw it 3 times, but I stopped the panel one and I watched it on YouTube, and then went back to the panel.
Okay.
Because,
so this is my ritual. I should tell you my ritual for watching Star Wars trailers. It's a ritual now because it's happened twice, I guess, or technically 3 times because there were 2 trailers for Force Awakens. But the ritual now, as it stands, is especially if there's a big panel beforehand, I will sit and make sure that my 1080p connection is seamless when watching it, so I will wait for half an hour if I have to make sure that freaking little grey bar goes.
Why is this a problem for you in 2017?
Because it's the third world, and it happens sometimes.
A fiber optic cable.
I have a fiber optic cable.
Then it's not doing its job.
That's the problem. Yeah, it's called MTNL. What do you want me to do? So I wait for that to happen, wait for that grey bar to get through. I wouldn't want that sponsorship. They would come, they're probably like gundas or just come and like cut off our thumbs eventually.
How many thumbs do you have left after using them for so long?
Not enough.
Okay.
So once that grey bar is done, I then sit and download said trailer. Like you, I watched it immediately the minute he revealed it, and actually sat there and I distinctly remember, like, he says, "All right, we're gonna watch the trailer now. Pause. Open up the other window." But then, wait a minute. I don't want to see it again immediately because I didn't think he'd show it twice. So I saw my downloaded video, but then I had to go back to the panel video.
Yeah, and then they
keep my eyes shut. And then, you know the shortcut keys on YouTube for fast forward 15 seconds?
Yeah.
I sat and counted 2.5 minutes by pressing L that many times because I don't want to see anything until I see it properly,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I waited for that to happen. Saw the thing once. He said, "All right, we've got to watch it again." It's like, "Oh well, I guess I got to rewind now and watch it all over again."
No, I mean
And it
you
was
could have,
perfectly great.
you could have. As in
I
yeah.
rewinded,
So
my
I watched the
video.
second time with the fans. I did it with the fans.
I really shouldn't be
but you know
admitting
why?
these things.
Because
I really
what's
shouldn't be
really
admitting
cool
this.
is
man.
is why I enjoy watching it the second time with the fans is because you get to hear their reactions
Oh, yeah,
in
of
the
course.
in the thing,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's like tremendous fun, man. Like to hear what they're because we're in sync. All of us are in sync,
of course.
and it's great. So
Yeah.
so that trailer drop. I want to say it wasn't my favorite teaser ever, and it's for good reasons because they didn't show enough, and I was like,
Yeah, which is
I was
great.
like, that's great, but
It's
like,
great.
but it didn't move. Like the Rebels trailer moved me. I think out of all the 3 trailers that came out, so one was Battlefield 2, Rebels, and obviously TLJ. And I think Rebels kind of got to me the most because in the Rebels panels they said that this is going to be the final season.
Mm-hmm.
Filoni announced it. To much like it was really sad, and it was quite a meaningful moment that like
It was sad.
Tia
but
Sokka was like
but
crying.
I immediately went to like, oh, but actually, yeah.
Yeah, no, of course. No,
Like,
no one's
I'm not at
contesting
all upset.
the vision of Dave
I'm not
Filoni.
upset
yeah.
about it, yeah, no.
Yeah, but it looks great and it's
Bittersweet.
and more information that we've got is that it's only going to be 15 episodes and far more serialized. So
Mm-hmm.
apparently it takes only like 2-3 episodes to get into the last arc, and then it just
Great.
powers on through that.
Friggin'
Which is
Logan it,
awesome.
man. Just
yeah,
Logan that.
exactly. So they're gonna be doing that, and yeah, full faith in Filoni, man. Like especially when he has that little moment at the 40 years panel, and George Lucas who shows up for this thing,
Yeah.
and he's there, and you have Dave Filoni sitting next to him, and it's so awesome because like this guy is the next George Lucas.
Yeah.
and it's great. Like that was great. And Freddie Prinze Jr., man, that guy he's solid. Like he's such a dude.
He knows how to.
He knows how to do it.
Yeah.
He's great. He was much better than say Hayden Christensen.
Jesus, you saw that, right?
I did see
was,
it. It was good to see him.
It was fun. It was nice. Like, hey, it's like bring the whole
It's
family.
Anakin Skywalker.
But you can't deny Hayden Christensen is that distant cousin
He's the
who you
black
just
sheep
forgot
of the-
existed. It's like, oh, that guy, and it's endearing because like I haven't seen you in 10 years.
Exactly,
Catch
yeah.
me up on 10 years in
Catch
5
me
minutes,
outside.
and now go away again for another 10 years. And I'll see you at the 50th.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy seeing him there. I like that, and there was one moment where he just looks at everyone, he's just like, wow, I am really happy to see you guys, because I don't think he's
Yeah.
recieved this kind of love
No, he's
in
not.
the last, like,
no, he is
since,
not.
Revenge
Walking down
came
the
out.
street, Hayden Christensen does not necessarily get all the biggest whoops in the world.
Which kind of sucks. I like the guy, man. I like him. He's Anakin Skywalker, and it formed a big part of my childhood.
You know what I don't like?
Yeah.
Sand.
I don't know. I think it's a bit coarse. It gets everywhere.
everywhere.
All right.
Okay.
I like the little cameos from Liam Neeson and
Yeah, they were fun.
Mace.
Yep.
They were great. Yeah, it was all good. It was all great. I enjoyed it. Harrison Ford at his first celebration ever, surprising and great. That Carrie Fisher tribute was moving. It was all good. It was
all
a
great.
great
It was all
celebration, which is why I don't think they can
Yeah.
top it. Yeah.
But just really quick, getting back to Filoni for a second, I really hope against hope that obviously 2019 will see the last one in the 9, right? But never say never. There very easily could be a 10, just because of trends and the way things go.
And
But
they
I feel like
split the movie into 2 parts.
maybe,
I don't
but they might take their own sweet time. 50th anniversary's got to be something humongous. It's got to be catastrophically big. Filoni needs to get a live action movie, man.
They're gunning for that. Like
he needs episode 10.
He needs episode 10, or he needs an anthology film where he can do his own thing, and like he needs. You know what he needs, dude? Can I just say it? He needs the Obi-Wan film.
He really does.
He should do the Obi-Wan
He really
film.
does.
That would be amazing. And I'm surprised. Like, I think that's a big one. I think that's going to happen.
But what I'm arguably more curious to see, though, obviously he's an amazing storyteller.
Yeah.
But what he has to his advantage is being the creative head and showrunner of an animated universe.
Yeah.
Like he said it on
So
record
many
so many
times.
times.
Yeah.
It's like the great thing about when I'm writing it on a page is I know exactly what it's going to look like, and it turns out to be exactly what I have in my
He
head.
has to be super economical, right?
Which is amazing, which is a great luxury, because like if you're writing a script or like directing a movie, you're at the mercy of like 1,000 other people's,
Very true.
ability to do what you want them to do.
Yeah.
And so I want to see him sort of
He should do the Obi-Wan
be
film.
at the mercy of like other people.
Yeah,
And
he
see how he
should
holds
definitely
up,
do the Obi-Wan film. Or so the other thing that people are obviously asking him to do is obviously now do the next animated series between 6 and 7, and that spans like 30 years, so it's going to be really difficult. I don't know how they're going to approach that, but I think I mean, he would be great to do it, but I think they can pass it on to somebody else now. Like, he's done his bit for Lucasfilm. He needs that movie now, so I definitely agree there. But yeah, I'm surprised that Ewan McGregor was not present at this at all. It was just I'm telling you, they're definitely thinking about it, because like, he's the other beloved character who didn't get his... I mean, they got him in Clone Wars, but like, I think Ewan McGregor kind of gave life to it in the way that, Hayden Christensen could not be Anakin Skywalker.
He did, but every time I've seen Ewan McGregor in interviews...
And he wants to do it.
Whenever I've seen him talking about Star Wars, obviously he wants to do it, because like, why wouldn't you? I mean, like, especially if you've done 3 of those movies, clearly you like this universe enough to want to do it. Clearly they're paying you enough. Yeah. So doing a 4th is a no-brainer, especially the trends being the way they are. But I've always gotten an odd vibe about him whenever he's talked about it, because he's always seemed, like I said, responsive to the idea. It's a great idea. Who would turn that up? But, pass that up. Yeah. But he never seemed to have the genuine fan enthusiasm about it. Like, I've seen a lot of other people do it.
I've seen one interview of his where he knows exactly what he wants, where he's like, I think I'm ready to do like 2 films. He's like, I think 2 films would be great to kind of span the time between, the young Obi-Wan to Tatooine, Homid Obi-Wan. And he's like, I think it's perfect, because right now I'm in the exact same age I should be to be between those 2.
Sure.
So he's spoken about that. Like, I've seen like a couple of interviews where he knows how he would go about it. Right. And like the fact that, and I always prefer it when an actor is heavily invested in the role before a studios, because then it's kind of...
like, if you look at it this way, like, he, I think, is pretty far from the tree in terms of how people like Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill were really into that thing. Like, the fact that they can still quote their lines backwards and things like that, because they really, really cherish these characters. Yeah. And McGregor, like I said, is still
he's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. He doesn't seem to love...
He's not like Liam Neeson. He's not Liam Neeson. No, I think he's a fan. I definitely think he's a fan.
I mean he's not a fan's fan. You know what I mean? Like, he's not love with it like some of the major players are.
I don't know. I don't know. I think he may be, but like, I think he's such an actor's actor that he will still treat Star Wars like this is an acting gig, and I get because he's a dramatic actor and he's done so many different roles. He's kind of like not as far left as, say, Liam Neeson, who just did Phantom Menace and then was out of it, and he's not like Mark Hamill, which will be, he's forever the legacy character. So he's somewhere there in the middle, and I think if you want to bring him over to this side, it's probably going to be with this.
I enjoy that we got fans fan and actors actor within 30 seconds of each other.
Yeah, this is true. Cool. All right, cool. So that's the Star Wars take for Celebration. We'll be talking more about it as we get closer to the film. We're going to take a short break now and come back, talk about time travel in a completely different side of things. See you after the break.
What's the best new restaurant in town?
Which bar sucked?
What's the worst new Hindi film?
What's the most obscure thing to do on the weekend?
And what's the most interesting new walking tour?
If you want to know how to make the most of Bombay, listen to the Podcast by thedailypow.com. We are Pronuti,
Amit,
and Purva.
We're your guide to what to do, see, and eat in the city. New episodes are out every Monday on thedailypow.com and on iTunes, Audioboom, SoundCloud, the IVM podcast app, or on any other podcasting app you prefer.
Hello again. You are back with us. But you never left, probably. Or maybe you did. But I would hope not. But if you did, hello again.
We can edit all of that out now. And let's start from here. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
We're Tejas and Jishnu, and we're talking about...
But you already knew that.
Oh, God.
Because you might not have left. But if you did, hello again.
Is this something to time travel?
Did we just go back in time? You didn't think.
I helped you.
You didn't think. You didn't think. But...
Okay, so we're talking about time travel in science fiction, and we were urged by Akshat to kind of get into the best, or maybe most realistic, or maybe the most underrated. But I think we're going to try and cover a vaguer kind of gamut, and here's why. Because they're kind of different categories, and I said I had a plan for approaching this topic. Mm-hmm. So when I was thinking about how do we talk about it, I was thinking first maybe we talk about how do movies do like time travel, okay? Mm-hmm. Because a couple of ways they've done it. And then we kind of get into what is the time travel movie that you really liked as a kid that kind of got you into science fiction? Because I think that we can't say, if I have to think of my favorite time travel film, I'm split between what was probably the best and what is the one that kind of got me into it. For example, if you take, like as a kid, Terminator 2 or Terminator and Terminator 2, right? Kind of, it's not, you wouldn't think of it as a time travel film, but there's a lot of grandfather paradox happening in that, right? Like, Arnie goes back in time to kill the unborn child.
The whole premise is based upon altering the past.
Exactly. Yeah. So very much so is a time travel film, but at the same time, it's not the best time travel film, right? It's more for it's like a great action classic.
Sure.
So I thought we'd first discuss how movies do time, then we talk about what you liked as a kid, and now what you like as an adult. And I think that should cover a good spectrum of time travel. So let's talk about the different ways movies have approached this time travel. There's often, I always think that, there's this one line in Days of Future Past which kind of keeps coming back to me, which is a scene where, the young Hank McCoy, who's Beast, he says, it doesn't matter what you do in time if you go back in time and try and change it, because time is ultimately immutable, and that if you throw a pebble into a pond, the ripples will happen, but it'll still finally become still again.
Yeah.
So I think what they meant is that there's what we consider there's only one timeline. Most movies just think of it as one timeline, right? And if they go back in time, they're entering the same timeline rather than entering a secondary kind of creating a new timeline and then following through with that. So let's talk about the movies which go back in this singular time frame that I think people think exists. And one of those films is in like Interstellar, for example. Yeah, it says that everything has happened already. It's non-linear.
Right.
Everything has happened. So if you have moved back in time, you've already done it, and something's already happened.
Yeah, time isn't a line; it's a circle. That whole
exactly. And that Rust Cool vibe. So, what movies would come to you or to your mind as a film that you think kind of has this whole singular time frame and has not kind of broken into an alternate timeline as such?
I welcome every reason to bring up Galaxy Quest.
Ah, right, of course, yeah.
The final act is based upon 13 seconds that get altered when you initiate the Omega 13, and everything is peachy keen. If you go back in 13 seconds, nothing changes other than the one guy that pressed said button and knows that the button was pressed, and then can take action against evil villain and evil doers.
You're going to have to re-explain that.
It's just as simple. For those that haven't seen it, the movie has this device called the Omega 13, which is this ambiguous contraption that exists at the heart of the ship. It's sort of like this power source where they don't know what would happen if you messed with it.
Yeah.
And at a very opportune moment, our beloved hero, Tim the Toolman Taylor, decides to press said Omega 13. And what it does is it takes him back in time by 13 seconds. But nobody else other than Tim the Toolman Taylor knows that it happened. And so when he did that, when he presses the button, he gets 13 seconds back to just make one simple adjustment and save the day. And, they live happily ever after.
All right.
So that's one really good example, I think, of a very simple time travel move thrown in at the most convenient point. It's comical, it's stupid, it doesn't have any gravity to it.
Yeah.
But, that's kind of why I like the movie. It's a break because it doesn't have any gravity and it's a lot of fun. And so I think, to sort of segue to what you're saying, like movies that you watched when you were a kid and things that you liked when you were a kid. I think the main reason we liked a lot of time play when we were kids is because of just how fun it is without having to think about the repercussions of anything.
The realism of
anything.
Yes.
And actually, my first thought was more so than movies and whatnot. My first memory of sort of seeing people out of time and the fun that you get when you see them out of time is episodes like Looney Tunes episodes where you see Bugs Bunny fighting Elmer Fudd at the opera in the 1700s and Romeo and Juliet being played out, or you see the Flintstones and the Jetsons meeting each other.
And that was cool. I did enjoy those.
And so those little things, I think, show that the minute people decided to take people out of time and put them somewhere else, you can just have a lot of fun with it. And it's just a simple little device. It's just an engine for mayhem to happen. And then everything gets taken care of when you meet the magic sorcerer and he's like, hey, cool, I'm going to undo everything and tap your heels together 3 times and everything's fine.
Right. Speaking of engine, a movie that I really, really enjoyed, and I think which did the same for an entire generation, was Back to the Future. And for the simple reason that it basically put a kid like us in, and put the power of time travel in that person's hands, which is Marty McFly. and basically just kind of has fun with the same idea. So when I think of like I think best and favorite, obviously, is difficult for me to kind of divide those two things. But like, I think definitely one of my favorites is Back to the Future 1 and 2. 3 is kind of like, yeah, it's fun and it's great. But I think the fact that 1 and 2 are so editable with each other. Like, you can overlap those two movies. It's exactly the same time frame, more or less. And you could just overlap those films. Just proves how good the time travel... how good the writing is of the time travel and how consistent it is in a weird way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's great.
And I love that. I love that, it kind of... I think like Prisoner of Azkaban is exactly like that. That last sequence when they use the time turner and see themselves doing something that, and that, I love that. I love that. And Back to the Future does that so well. I think it kind of made it like they patented that style of doing it. It was really great. And I think that movie definitely kind of follows the same singular time frame aspect. Like, there is only one timeline and that's it. And if you change things in that, it'll change the future and things like that, but like you won't see it. Like it'll happen. Like for example, his picture of his brother and his sister fading away in like a photograph, like
in Azkaban.
No, sorry. This is in Back to the Future.
Oh, Back to the Future.
Yeah, every time he sees that, it kind of fades away a little bit. It's like that aspect is super comical though.
Yeah.
But everything else is pretty cool. I like the fact that like he gets to visit his own parents and see how they become so and so. And the other thing that I really liked about these movies, like this like kind of a cliche, but is that whenever they try to fix something, they screw it up, and the screw up is really what makes the events happen. Like for example, his dad kind of getting in the way of fighting Biff, and kind of laying this like left hook on him, which finally makes his mother fall in love with him. It's kind of like happens by accident. Like he's trying to reach them in time. He gets trapped in this guy's car. Like a bunch of stuff happens, and then it just like it happens involuntarily, which is nice. I like that. It's not really like he plans to fix things, but he doesn't achieve it as well, and it happens anyway. So I like that.
One thing that you don't see come up too much with this whole ripple effect thing that you mentioned a second ago.
Yeah.
Going off of the fact that a lot of movies that do this thing where you can see the past you or the future you, and people, have to skirt around the idea, like don't touch anything, or, bad things will happen. And inevitably bad things do happen because somebody does end up touching something, or like dropping a giant truck full of poop on your car.
Exactly.
Things like that happen.
Yeah.
But you never see people go, at least I don't think it happens too often, where they go one step further, where they enter the past, let's say as an example, you enter the past, don't touch anything, you touch something, bad stuff happens, and you spend the entire movie trying to undo the bad stuff.
Exactly, yeah.
But then what about the fact that bad stuff did happen for a brief period of time, and so those characters in the past that have endured that bad stuff will now live their entire life with the memory of, man, remember that one time the poop fell on my head? That was a bad day.
This is a good segue to a movie that does this, is Frequency. Okay, so now I'll just give you the basic plot of this movie. You've not seen this movie.
No.
All right. So it's very simple. Is that there's a guy, Dennis Quaid. Okay, he's a firefighter. He has a ham radio, and he lives in this part of town in America where you can see the Northern Lights. And he's part of that ham radio club and whatever. He just uses it now and then. And he's a firefighter. He dies in an accident once. He
dies once. He dies the one time. Yeah.
No, this is important. That's why he dies once in this firefighting accident. And his son, who's like he's a kid at that point in time, he grows up and he becomes a cop. And he finds this old ham radio of his father's and he dusts it off and he says, oh, I remember this. And he starts to tune it and blah, blah, blah. And the Northern Lights are going on and he suddenly gets a frequency. And basically starts communicating with his own father in the past. And he tells him, and he's still alive there, and he says, hey, listen, you don't believe me, but blah, 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 blah. If you just had taken a right turn instead of left in that building, you would have been alive. And so he changes the fate of his entire father and blah, blah, blah. And he does it. And so for in terms of like people making a mistake and kind of changing those mistakes in time travel, this is that movie, and it's a really great movie. And so now here's the second time that he dies, and this is not a spoiler or anything like that. He's not alive anyway because I think for the story to work, he's not alive anyway because he dies of like natural causes later on. So he's still dead, but he still talks to his father. And there's this one really cool scene where he has to give a piece of evidence to his dad. His dad has to give it to him. in the future, and he's like, how do I give this wallet to you? And he's like, hide it in a place you don't think anybody will find for like 30 years. And so he opens like this, plank of wood from the floor, and he wraps up the wallet and puts it in there, and he places it down. He's like, yeah, I don't think I'll ever find it again. And he's like, check now. And he opens it up in the future, and it's there, and it's really cool. It's awesome. I just thought that was really, really awesome use of time travel. And a pretty underrated film, as far as underrated films go in time travel. So yeah, so that's Frequency.
Cool.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to take a break from the most cerebral, scientific movies. I think you can divide the time travel films into movies that kind of use time travel intrinsically as part of the story, like to drive the story, and some of them which are like kind of part of the story, but just using that as an effect to kind of tell a larger story. So I'm going to ask you which is your favorite from that category, which is the second category, and I'll explain further.
Yeah.
For example, the movie Midnight in Paris. Have you seen it?
Yes.
All right, so Midnight in Paris is a great movie.
Absolutely
Woody Allen.
love it. Yeah.
And in that, there's a struggling author who kind of is in love with, the French culture and Paris and, classical authors and things like that. And by mistake, he kind of gets picked up in a car late night when he's drunk, and he goes and meets all his heroes, which includes...
Trip,
it's a crazy, crazy trip. And he ends up meeting like Salvador Dali. He meets F. Scott Fitzgerald and his wife as well. So he kind of meets all his heroes, and so the story progresses that way.
Right.
So I love those kind of films where they kind of take the idea of like time or traveling through time, and then but like end up telling a larger, more emotional story. So that's actually one of my favorite movies in this category. Do you have a movie which kind of follows that?
I mean, yeah, there's so many, because if, like I said, we're now talking about not exactly. Well, I was going to say not exactly time travel, but this is arguably more time travel than Back to the Future is, because you're literally traveling through it like it's a safari. You're going back through time without any consequence. Like when you go through a safari, you're entering somebody else's world, and it's really cool to you because you don't belong here, and you know that there are no repercussions, because once you drive through this forest or jungle or whatever, you haven't really left any marks, any footprints of your having been there.
You're just a witness to it.
Yeah, and so that's, I think, like Doctor Who is built exclusively on that.
This is true.
They travel through every frigging direction and dimension there is, and most of the time it's left untouched. There are the longer story arcs.
They have friends with all these
there are
characters,
longer story arcs, but the thing is, like, their filler episodes, going back to like last week's episode, we're talking about 22 episode shows. This is, again, guilty as all hell. But the reason I think that this show works a lot better than most 22 episode shows is because it has time on its side. And when you have time travel, when you have the option of saying, well, today I want to see a zebra and tomorrow I want to see a lion and tomorrow I want to see a velociraptor, you can do that in a show like Doctor Who. Because if you're ever getting bored, you literally dream up whatever the hell you want, and you can throw it in. Why? Because there's this thing called the TARDIS, and it makes the impossible possible.
True. Now, it's a good conduit.
Now there's a reason that you can have I genuinely have no idea how many episodes of Doctor Who there are. Maybe over 1,000. Definitely over 500. The reason you can have a show like Doctor Who go for hundreds upon hundreds of episodes and not a story like Midnight in Paris. Midnight in Paris has to be restricted to 90 minutes because it's built upon
a singular
person story. No, I mean, Doctor Who is about the Doctor's singular story. But it's built upon rational thinking and questioning the fact that this guy is tripping balls the entire time. And you have Rachel McAdams' character in that movie, his wife, who is... She's not exactly the antagonist of the film, but she's the realism. She is the realist. She's the one that the audience connects to. You're just following Owen Wilson's trip because it's fun and it's amusing, but at some point it's going to give, and it does, and so that's where the movie has to end, and you have to realize that, hey, this guy is kind of off his rocker, and it's a Woody Allen movie, guys. Just let it be, and now we'll cut the credits.
Actually, that's one of my favorite lines in that movie is when he goes back into like one of these olden day things. He goes back into the past and he meets all the surrealists, and he just says, "Don't you find it weird? Don't you find it weird that a man can be taken back into the past and then meet all these people that he's dreamed about for so many years, and all of them are just like." No, I don't find that weird at all. In fact, that seems perfectly rational, and they're all surrealists. So I just find that so funny. But it's a great bit of writing from Woody Allen. But yeah, like I love movies like that. Like there's a couple of other films which kind of remind me of the same thing. Time Traveler's Wife is one that comes to mind. It's about again Rachel McAdams in another. She's always with these strange psychological, whether it's Doctor Strange or in Midnight in Paris. But basically, Rachel McAdams is married to Eric Bana. And Eric Bana's character is like somebody who suffers from a disease, basically called chrono something, and basically keeps getting displaced in time. Like he can't help it. He just pops up and in different parts of time.
Sure.
And it's really interesting because it's a love story ultimately. And he meets and the movie itself is kind of non-linear, obviously.
Yeah.
And you see that they're very much in love and they're married and stuff like that. And you kind of follow his story. And as he gets older, suddenly, and she keeps telling him the story of how she met this one man when she was a kid who kind of told her the same kind of story. And then she ultimately met somebody similar. And you realize that it's him who's gone back again to the past and he just meets her as a kid.
Oh, man.
It's not like a realization or any great epiphany or anything like that,
Sure.
but it's just like a really beautiful film. Like at one point when they finally decide to get married, he disappears and like everyone's at the wedding and they're all waiting there and suddenly appears and he just comes to the altar and he's just like, oh cool, but he's got like really grey hair, he looks much older, and she's like, she obviously knows that this is not the same Eric Bana who was just here. It's like somebody from the future who got displaced and came back.
Okay.
So it's a really interesting plot, but obviously it's to tell a much it's kind of like a long distance kind of story, like it's a relationship-y romance, and it's really great. And I love that kind of movie. Like I've spoken about Lake House before on this show, which is again a movie with Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves, and they deliver messages through time through a mailbox, and it's like a romantic science fiction movie. But yeah, excellent. I really like when they use science to kind of tell an emotional story, like Eternal Sunshine, etc., things like that. So yeah, so that's one type of like movie category. And then if you get to the main, like the hardcore science fiction aspect of it, which is like using science to tell like a big part of the story, and like using the actual science fiction part of it to kind of drive the story ahead. In that sense, like one of my favorite movies is, and how they used it really well was Star Trek, the new J.J. Abrams Star Trek. I really like that they kind of absolved themselves from like a continuity which has been going on forever and ever with, William Shatner's and the Next Generation, etc., by just kind of using time travel to kind of say that everything that you saw previously is not canon in this film franchise, right?
Sure.
And they killed off his father right in the first 12 minutes of the movie, and I really loved that. I thought that was like an amazing use of time travel, and it was also an amazing way to use Leonard Nimoy's character as Spock, as old Spock, and this new Spock, and I thought that was also really, really good. But yeah, tell me some of your.
I was thinking of JJ as well, because JJ is one of the guys who's probably most guilty of using time again and again and again, and not always at all to the best use. I think the worst example of time travel I've ever seen is in Lost. I've seen that entire season. I've seen that entire show. I was in it.
I think I gave up by the second season.
I was a rabid fan when it was happening. Like,
you watched it till the end?
Oh, I watched it till the end.
Okay.
I watched the shit out of that show. But I mean, but I forget how many seasons there were, maybe 6 or something?
6 seasons,
something like that. By like season 4, I was grinding my teeth.
So what kind of time travel happens there? Is it just like a non-linear form?
Yeah, that's the thing. So Lost arguably was one of the first shows to really, really get it into the popular culture and make it well known, and sort of not break the mold, because like I said, it wasn't the first show to do this, but it was arguably one of, if not the biggest show to introduce this kind of storytelling to the masses and make it accessible to a larger audience. And by virtue of that, now you have a lot of films where this stuff happens and a lot of TV shows where this happens, and people don't think so much about it.
Yeah.
You see time travel a lot more these days, and I think Lost has a big part of that.
Okay.
So the problem with Lost was that the first couple seasons were interesting because there were flash forwards and flashbacks, right? And we didn't know up until, I want to say, like at least season 2 or 3,
that they weren't happening.
That not everything was in the same, that you weren't jumping constantly to the back. Because at first, when you start the show, it's at the crash. The crash happens.
Yeah.
And then throughout the first season, we're getting to know all the giant ensemble of characters. And so obviously, we go back in time to before the crash, and we get to know what they were like, so we can see what motivates their actions now. But then, some point randomly in the middle, which is a good idea, I think, not in theory, but not in practice, was that they started jumping even further back.
Before the crash.
Well before the crash.
Okay.
But then they also jumped forward in time a little bit to an alternate timeline.
Oh,
which
what?
was not explained. Which was not explained until much, much later.
That's bizarre.
Right. So for the longest time, that's the whole reason that like this whole rabid serialization of like cliffhangers and whatnot became a thing, because Lost would give you these like fleeting moments of like, holy crap, how is this guy in outer space or whatever, not outer space, but whatever, doing this absurd thing. This makes no sense, and so you want to tune in next week to find out, and you don't find out.
Was this at the same time like Heroes was going on also?
Yes, they were contemporaries.
They were
contemporaries.
both going on, and I remember Hiro Nakamura, the main character, he would constantly like out of control of his own powers, like he didn't know how to control it. He would jump like some episodes which were really cool, go like 5 years into the future and see where all the heroes are. Sure. I mean, I guess he didn't predict it was going to get cancelled, but everything else was like really, really cool. So I thought, I felt like
they were contemporaries for like a few seasons, and then Lost went ahead with it. But the thing is that it was just so all over the place that by the time we got to the final seasons, we were getting into existential crises. We were getting into like people are already dead, and we're seeing them in the future.
Spoilers, guys. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like it's just it was complete chaos in every which way, and the plot was completely lost.
Do you know the ending, right?
Yeah. Do I understand it? No, but I know what the ending was.
Wait, you don't understand it?
No, that's the problem. Like, as far as the world is concerned in general, it's like, yeah, they were all dead to begin with.
That was the
but
ending,
not
right?
Exactly.
Wasn't it purgatory or something like that?
Not exactly. That's the problem. It's not. It's purgatory. ... Like, there's a lot of ifs and buts and addendums you have to add to that explanation.
So were they dead or not? They weren't.
Not exactly, but yes, but not exactly. That's the thing. Like, it's so confusing. But anyway, what I'm getting at is Abrams has used time travel constantly.
Yeah.
And when TFA was coming out, my biggest thing was like, oh my God, is he going to do this?
And he does.
And he does it in a very simple
way.
But it's not subtle, because it's clearly like,
it's a scene. It's a whole,
like, oh my God, we're back.
Which is weird. It's not part of the paradigm of Star Wars.
Exactly. It doesn't fit into the paradigm of Star Wars in that it hasn't happened really.
Ever. We've never had flashbacks in Star Wars, right?
But then you think about it, why? Of course you can, because with the Force you can do friggin' anything. You can make lightning appear out of your pinky. You can make time appear in front of you.
Actually, I mean, technically, in the Dagobah system, he kind of puts him through this whole thing when Luke fights this Darth Vader guy and he cuts his head off. I mean, it's a weird psychological moment, which they kind of used well in another way, which is time travel, right? Like,
like if in the 70s they had the technology of today, then they probably would have done a similar sequence when Vader appears at Dagobah.
Yeah, exactly.
But they didn't. They were just like, hey, you now enter frame. Okay, cool. That was it.
In slow motion.
In slow motion with like some smoke.
Yeah,
that's about it.
So that happens in The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
And that's great. Yeah. All right, so before we close this segment, we're going to do a final pick for your choice of time travel film. And we're going to start with somebody who's not here. It's the editor of the Geek Fruit website, Siddhant Mehta. I'm just going to play his voice note, which he's just sent across.
So I would pick Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, because it's clearly the best movie to do with time travel. I mean, they're going to become the greatest rock musicians of all time. But what's important to note here is George Carlin comes back in time in a phone booth to make sure they finish their history homework. And it doesn't get better than that. I dare any of you to name a better movie than this. You're all liars if you do. And in your heart of hearts, you know that this is the exact way time travel movies should be made, framed, and explained. Don't forget, all the historical figures come to their, I'm guessing, city in California and get into all kinds of antics. Very 80s and 90s. So, yep, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. The best.
Yeah, they're making a new one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited for that.
When's that coming out?
I don't know. It's
not soon enough.
In the near future, I suppose. But yeah, man, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Yeah, classic.
What's yours?
I think but it does hark back to that whole, which is your favorite now, which is the clinically best, and that's fine, right?
You can't,
No, because there are a few movies which I'd say which are really sharp, like Primer, for example, which is like this really indie film about like the real consequences of what happens when you do time travel, and it's like intense and it's really cerebral. And it's really good. I mean, but again, it's not going to be my favorite. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, so we have one more voice note from Dinkar, who is again not here, and he sent in what his pick is.
Hey guys, it's me, Dinkar, from the future. Yes, I'm sending you a message from the future. It's pretty great here. We all live on Mars. We've got flying cars. And Half-Life 2 is coming out next week, I hear. So we're all pretty kicked about that.
He means Half-Life 3.
Yeah.
Now, I remember we were talking time travel movies in this episode. So I want to mention one that I think you guys have covered, like the greatest hits of time travel and like some gems and whatnot. So I want to talk about one that's kind of a time travel movie, but I'm not really sure. It's Groundhog Day, which is more of a time loop movie, I could say, because there's not really a lot of travel that happens. But I think it's a great movie with a very everlasting, evergreen sort of concept, like Source Code and Edge of Tomorrow, which came out in the past couple of years, are just like sci-fi updates of the same idea. I feel like it has a lot of depth, a lot of humor, and it kind of it explores the idea of time in a way that's very unusual, which is why it's probably like still a cultural touchstone. And the performances are great, and I think Bill Murray is amazing. Oh, and before I go, one very important thing: if you meet present Dinkar, that's me, but in your timeline, you have to give him $500. This is very important. It will save the world. Don't ask. Just give him the money.
Alright, cool. So that was Dinkar.
What bathroom was he recording? Were his pants down?
Some classic
Oh my god,
rock
I'm getting images now in my
classic
mental
rock was
brain.
playing in the background and suddenly stops in the middle. But yeah,
I hope he flushed and washed his hands.
But yeah, Groundhog's Day, man. Classic. I didn't think about it. It is a time loop film.
Completely.
Yeah, definitely. And
it's Back to the Future, man.
And he also brought up Source Code, which is like it's actually a pretty underrated film, which was by Duncan Jones, the guy who did Warcraft and Moon and stuff like that. It was a pretty decent film, and Russell Peters is in it.
In Source Code?
Yeah. It's weird.
What?
It has a weird ending, but like I think the movie is solid. It's pretty good that way.
What's your pick?
My pick would be I've already mentioned Back to the Future, so I don't want to talk about that again. That is like my favorite, I'd say. But I think a really good science fiction time travel film is a film called Predestination. And I think it's a must-watch for all sci-fi nerds. I may have spoken about it earlier, but Predestination is a movie which has only two principal characters. One played by Sarah Snook and one played by Ethan Hawke. And it's based on a Robert Heinlein kind of short story, but it's the greatest. I don't want to give too much. I don't want to talk about it too much, but it's basically like the ultimate time paradox. And it's set like it's got this really film noir kind of thing. It's about a guy who's Ethan Hawke, who's a detective, and he's trying to stop a bomber in the future at some point. But every time he tries to do it, he fails, and he doesn't know why. He doesn't know why he keeps failing. Every time he keeps going back in the past to try and change something, go back, but keeps failing. And so we kind of dive into his story and see why that occurs. And it's insane. Like the movie, like the moment it kind of has its big reveal or whatever at the end, and like the explanation and everything like that, you look at it and you're just like, wow, I have to watch this movie again from the top. Like it's that kind of film. So yeah, I'd recommend everyone, like, you must watch. It's a pretty indie film, I'd say. Like I don't know if it did extremely well. I remember watching it. It was out on like torrents like for a long time, and I watched it and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. And then like a few months later I was like, I was still telling everybody to watch Predestination, and then it came out in the theaters here in India, and I was just like, what? What is going on? This is some time travel happening here. So I'd suggest everyone get into that. Predestination. It's got the best of cerebral science fiction and also a really emotional story. So get into that. What about you, Jishnu?
Since you already mentioned it, now you got me thinking. Probably Midnight in Paris.
Yeah,
it's not like I said, it's the safari travel bit of time rather than time
itself,
than the sci-fi thing of it, because I think that's always been more fun for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Just when you don't have to think about consequences and you just use it as a simple little trope, because once you open up that box of like, okay, now we're going to rationalize this for you, and we're going to fight against how we might sort of alter the shape of things and realities and whatnot. That's when you get into that X-Men universe, and it's just all kinds of chaos.
Yeah,
not for the right reasons.
Yeah,
Midnight in Paris, I think, is great because it's so charmingly out of nowhere. It's. I mean, Woody Allen movies in general are really charming, and I love them. But
he's a national treasure, man.
It's done in it's poetic because I think it's very pertinent to that guy's own personal
Exactly,
story. Because
yeah.
just the quick premise of Midnight in Paris, for those of you who haven't seen it, is it's about a writer who goes with his fiance at the time to Paris because he's always wanted to go there. She always wanted to go there because it's romantic. He wanted to go there because he wants
All
to
his favorite
get
writers
inspiration from the
spent
city.
some time in Paris.
Right,
Yeah.
and he's really clearly unhappy with his life and about the marriage potentially as well. And so he just goes for a walk one night on his own.
Yeah.
He may or may not have had a little too much to drink, and then next thing you know, we are thrust into this what feels like an acid trip
In the
of
1920s,
him.
right? He visits the
somewhere around
1920s
there.
first.
And like they just mentioned, he meets a bunch of literary and artistic geniuses, and it makes no sense.
Yeah.
But if you sort of empathize with the fact that the guy really, really wants nothing more than to do this,
Yeah.
it feels like an escapism sort of film, which is what time travel
Yeah.
movies are, right? They're about something that is impossible,
Yeah.
right? Something that makes no sense, and it's just a fun trope. You can go down the Back to the Future route, which is really loud and action-filled and explosive and
fun
as all hell.
family-friendly,
Or you
yeah.
go down the Woody Allen route,
Yeah.
which I think was great because he took it in the direction of like, this is just quaint. It's charming as all hell.
And I think
love
it's
that.
not like time travel just for the sake of using time travel. I
Yeah.
think the whole point of the movie is like
it's not to be sexy and sell, which is kind of what Back to the Future does.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but like
No,
the Back to the
no.
Future's entire marketing pitch is
Yeah.
like, hey guys, wouldn't it be cool if you could meet your younger self?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
how much fun would that be? And it's a lot of fun. The
Yeah.
selling point of this movie is it's a really endearing story about a guy who's trying to find
his own voice.
His own
Yeah,
voice.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
a good way of putting it. And
I think
time travel happens to be in it.
No, it's also he brings up a topic I think that all artists kind of go through, which is that we're always in love with everyone loves nostalgia and everyone loves this whole classicist, and you always like look up to your heroes a certain way, and like we always like our work is never going to be as good as theirs, and things like that. And what I love is that in that he goes back into the past, and then the people in the past are also like, no man, we aren't good. Our heroes are even better, and it's like never ending. And so I think like the real story is like this whole romanticism of like this classical approach when what we write today is what's most important, because it always will be what we do right now. And I think using time travel to actually physically show these characters saying the same thing, that's the real win in that movie. So I think Midnight in Paris I think he won an Oscar for it.
I think
for
he did.
best screenplay or something. Yeah. Great movie, great actors, and cool time travel. Right.
Thanks for that.
Thank you. Yes.
Now, let me get my head out of the spin. While I do that, let's bring on the benevolent overlord of IVM podcasts, one Amit Doshi, who will regale us with something clearly worth regaling about. I don't know what he's going to talk about.
I think I do.
You will find out with me in just a second.
Hello listeners, my name is Munaf Kapadia.
And I am Nabil Merchant. We are the co-hosts of the show My Neighbor Zuckerberg.
On this show, we invite ordinary people who have extraordinary stories to share.
Tales of creativity, persistence and struggle. We call them entrepreneurs.
Tune in every Monday to listen to their journeys. We are available on iTunes, Audio Boom and the IVM Podcast app.
Okay, guys, welcome to a relatively newer segment on the show. It's called Geek Fruit Boss Level. And who better than the original OG boss, Amit Doshi. Thanks for being here.
All right. Hey,
You're one of the most level-headed bosses I know.
Yeah. So you're
that's
not
boss
less, it's not just
the
boss level.
level of
It's
the bosses.
level
headed
boss.
Level-headed boss. Cool.
Okay.
All right, so Amit, you're going to be telling us about some stuff. What are you going to be talking about?
So we were talking about the idea of a gateway fantasy book, right? Something which you can get people into the fantasy genre as such with.
Yeah, roughly. So, last week we had Alika here, also from IVM. She was kind of telling us about a board game that could get people into a slightly more advanced level of board gaming, which is a little above your risk, Monopoly, etc.
Right.
So kind of the same deal here. Like for people who have read fantasy, and I know a lot of people have read Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or things like that.
The thing is, fantasy comes in a bunch of different flavors, right? I mean, like you have the kind of secondary world fantasy, which is like a Game of Thrones, Wheel of Time, which is like just like a completely unexisting world. And it's an invented world.
It's a new world.
It's
right.
an invented world, right? And then there is your primary world fantasy, which is typically urban fantasy. That is basically supernaturals in the existing world.
Harry
Potter,
got it.
Harry Dresden. Urban fantasy has a lot of romance in it, which is stuff that I typically stay away. Stuff like the Suki Stackhouse stuff, the True Blood.
Twilight.
So Twilight, I guess, as well.
Twilight exists on this plane?
I have no idea.
Twilight's urban fantasy.
Okay, cool.
But so there's a lot of kind of romantic urban fantasy, but then there is some urban fantasy which is really kind of fun and cool as well. So the one I think I would recommend right now is the Iron Druid series by Kevin Hearn.
Okay.
It's a really kind of interesting gateway into this space. So,
if you're talking about urban fantasy.
Fantasy generally, because even though it's urban fantasy, it's got a lot of the elements that you would associate with secondary world fantasy, in the sense that it has those kinds of epic battles. And, you know, I mean, like, it has a lot of that kind of stuff.
So, a little bit like epic battles in downtown Manhattan? Is that what
Tempe, Arizona.
Okay, sure.
That other place, Manhattan.
So just to give you a brief idea about the show, what this series is about. So it's the hero of the series is a guy named Atticus O'Sullivan, who is a 2,000-year-old druid who basically has kept himself alive because he has found some Irish mythological elixir which allows him unlimited youth.
Right, okay.
So he's able to keep himself alive. And this is a world where there are witches and vampires and werewolves and all the rest of those kinds of things.
But it's set in like present day?
It's set in present day.
Sweet.
It's set in present day. He is an internet guy. He basically, so his day job is to sell rare books.
Okay.
And so he has a bookstore and he sells books over the internet as well. But so what's interesting, and there are a bunch of interesting characters as well in it, right? So I mean, like a lot of these other kinds of, there's an interesting vampire character. There are a bunch, his law firm is basically a bunch of werewolves. Then his apprentice is a bartender who is a witch.
Okay.
His dog, he has spelled so that his dog can talk to him in his mind.
Okay,
so the two of them have conversations with each other, which are hilarious. Actually, his dog is the funniest character in the book.
Nice.
So in the first story, which is called Hounded, it's basically he gets into a issue with werewolves, witches, his dog, and with the hunting gods from Ireland. So all of them are together kind of getting into like this whole thing. What I really like about this is it kind of really melds like, you know, our actual historical gods from across cultures.
Sweet, yeah.
And with this kind of whole thing. So like he's buddies with Jesus Christ.
What?
I was going to say, was he born the same year as Jesus?
He was born before Jesus.
Because roughly the same time, right?
So he's older than Jesus. But he didn't know Jesus at the time.
Sure.
But after Jesus died, he and Jesus have become buddies.
So they met like, oh, you're from Bethlehem too? Oh, me too, man. That was my hood. Oh my God.
Well, it's a little more complicated than
Nazareth,
that, but
massive.
it's somewhat like that, yeah. They have this whole thing where there's where he gets into a fight with Thor, the Norse thunder god, and that's one of the coolest things about this is a constant refrain is every single person who he meets who is, no matter how old, Thor is a dick. They all think Thor is the biggest asshole in the world.
This actually ties nicely because the minute you said it's in Arizona, I was like, I know somebody that landed in Arizona.
This is true. Yeah.
Because of that, during the course of the series, he gets into a fight with Thor.
Okay.
And he defeats Thor.
Okay.
And so because of that, all of the different thunder gods from across the world come to get revenge on him.
Okay.
So Indra comes, Perun from Russia
Wow,
comes,
this
Thor
is cool.
comes.
Jane Foster.
There is an African god called Shambhala or Shambhaka who comes.
So they've taken exactly what you said. They've taken like mythology across the board,
across
right? Like
the board,
from everyone's mythology.
So how many books are in the series?
There are, I think, 8 books out right now. The 9th book should be out sometime later this year.
Okay.
It's hilarious, man. I mean, like, you know, the series is just really, really funny. It's got like, you know, it's got that like dry humor kind of thing going on, and it's first person, right? So this guy keeps talking about himself as he's like the biggest loser in the world, and then you see when other people look at him, they're like all scared shitless of him, like constantly, and it's like it's a really fun kind of
sweet. And what's the main premise plotline of it? He's just going about his business.
Well, no, not exactly. So the main plotline of the 9 book series is he's trying to prevent Ragnarok from happening.
Oh, geez. Nice.
Because he destroys Thor, and because he destroyed Thor, there is nobody to fight the final Norse battle.
Okay.
So I mean, like all that stuff. So because of that, he now has to figure out how he can kind of do that. And so then Loki comes into the middle, and he's doing nonsense, and it's really fun.
Is this cool. Loki? Is this Loki more like the Avengers Loki, or is this more like Jim Carrey in The Mask Loki?
Oh, this is
Loki is Loki. It's like he's a troublemaker.
Well,
right?
no, this is a different kind of Loki though. This is like
his own Loki.
This is a different kind of Loki.
Cool.
This is more Norse mythology Loki, rather than a evolved version of him.
Yeah.
This is like hardcore, like dripping pus constantly and one-eyed and just the whole kind of completely insane.
Sounds like Bill Nighy in Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
So, I want to end this with a question. How do Marvel... Do they own the rights to like Thor as Thor? How do they distinctify the two?
He's a god.
Yeah. So you can't. It's public domain, right?
Yeah.
So, but then how do they?
God is everywhere.
So how do they make sure that they're Thor the way? So do they just copyright the likeness of that, or
I don't think they can copyright Thor, right? I mean, like because Thor exists.
Or the way he looks, perhaps.
Maybe that drawing of him.
Yeah,
maybe even that. I don't think so, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's a very common representation of Thor. Long
hair, helmet,
with the thunder, lightning.
This is a question for your werewolf lawyers.
We can ask them.
We are not the right people.
Awesome, though, man. This sounds really good. Last time, what's the name of the book?
Hounded is the first book. The series is called the Iron Druid series.
Great. Thanks a lot, man, Amit, for being here. Sure. And that sounds really interesting. I think we're done with our show. So you can find us on all social media, which is at Geekfruit HQ. That's on Twitter, that's on Instagram, and that's on Facebook. You can log on to our website, geekfruit.in. We have episodes that come out of the podcast every Monday. That's new episodes, and we have the Geekfruit Retcon on Tuesdays. Jishnu, where can we find you on Twitter?
You can listen to the episodes on the IVM app too.
Oh, yeah, that too. Yeah, of
gotta
course.
Plug the app now.
Rookie mistake.
The boss is here. We need to up our game a little bit. Yes, we did not think this through.
All right, the IVM app, guys. You can find on the iOS store, and you can find on the Android store. It's a great app. It has all the IVM podcasts. It's really solid. I have it myself, so that's why I can safely say it's great.
Amit, you want to pimp yourself out? Where can they find you?
Nah, IVM app. That's good enough, man.
She's like, I don't care about me. I just care about IVM. That's great. Jishnu, where can they find you?
You can find me at Jishnu Guha. And you can get everything else that we do at our website at geekfruit.in. You can press the little contact button over there and send us a quick email or send us whatever little happy thoughts you might have. You can email us directly.
I'm asking the people who are listening.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, about their time travel favorites. Write in, everybody, to contact geekfruit@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at Tejas Menon. That's it. That's the show. Cool.
Thank you.
You nerds.
Bye.
एक्सक्यूज मी भैया, एक्सक्यूज मी,
बोलिए मैडम।
मेन्यू में क्या है?
मेन्यू में सीन अनसीन है, पॉडकास्ट है, ऑन कोर्स है, साइरस है, मेड इन इंडिया, रीडिस्कवरी प्रोजेक्ट, एम्पावरिंग सीरीज, सेक्स वैक्स है, IVM लाइक्स है, सिंप्लीफाइड है, कीपिंग इट क्वियर है, टिंग्स एंड डेस्टिनेशंस है, माय नेबर जकरबर्ग है और द फैन गराज है। आपको क्या चाहिए?
एक बार रिपीट कर देंगे क्या?
रिपीट नहीं करता हम। आप जाओ IVMpodcast.com पे और सुनो ये सब, या फिर डाउनलोड करो उनका ऐप, सब आपकी उंगलियों पे।